only student this morning.
Woohoo!
That means you've got to be really smart. And you've got to pay really, really good attention, right? Because my eyes are upon you.
It's our mine.
Oh, yes. I do have Bill, too. But he's running the camera. But that means he's got to pay real good attention, too. Today, we're going back with our lesson, which is God takes care of me. Lorea, do you know that God takes care of you? We heard Brother Kevin testifying this morning how God had taken care of him. Wasn't that wonderful? And God took care of him when he was changing a breaker in his home, breaker box, and he could have been killed by it, but the Lord spared him and helped him to get it all done before the electricity came back on. That was wonderful. God takes care of me. And Lorea, do you have an example this week of God taking care of you? Doesn't look like you starved all week, does it?
Definitely not.
Did you have anything to eat all week? Yes, you did. So you he took care of you by giving you food, didn't he? He took care of you by giving you a mommy and a daddy. I mean, lots of things. So we're going to talk about all that as we go along. But last week, who did we study about God taking care of, Lorea?
Noah.
Right, God took care of Noah. And look at it. Look at this is one of the pictures. Noah built that ark. Inside of that ark was what? What was inside the ark, Lorea?
Every single animal on the world.
No.
But two
of each kind. Yes. And what else? What else were in there?
Noah's family.
How many people?
5?
Name them.
Wow.
Noah's wife, nobody really knows her name. Noah and his 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth.
And their
who else?
wives. Sorry.
Is that 5? Who else?
God.
Ham, Shem, and Japheth, they had somebody with them.
Right.
What?
Their wives.
Their wives. So there were 8 people in the ark, and all kinds of animals.
Like 50%
but after all the flood went away, look, God took care of them. Here out they came, and all the animals, and they spread over all the earth. And now here I am. I'm one of Noah's grandchildren. And you're my grandchild, so you're even farther away from Noah, but you're still one of his. God said he loved Noah, he blessed Noah, and he said, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. And he did, didn't he? He did. He was fruitful and multiplied and replenished the earth. Okay, so today we're going to study about God took care of his people. God took care of his people. Who are God's people, Lorea?
You, me.
But I mean, in the Bible, when we think of God's people, who do we think of?
The Israelites?
Yes, the Israelites or the Jews. And today we're going to study about how he took care of his people when they were down in Egypt. Okay, so let's do that. Let's study about that. If you remember, we studied this before, but it's in the time of Moses. And when Jacob took his family down into Egypt to meet with Joseph, that was a long time ago. Then the new Pharaoh came that didn't know Joseph. Joseph had died. And this Pharaoh caused the children of Israel, the Jews, to become slaves. The whole family, but there were thousands of them. The Jews had multiplied, and there were thousands of them. Now, was this before Noah or after Noah, Lorea? After. Okay, so this was all of these people had come to live on the earth. They had been born by all of the offspring of Noah, and the Jews had come and been born as an offspring of Noah until these Jews were multiplied in Egypt, and they were getting to be so many that Pharaoh caused them to be slaves. Look, it's horrible to be a slave, isn't it? And they were all crying out to God because God had promised Abraham that his people would be blessed. But are they blessed? They are? Is that blessed?
Oh.
That's not blessed. But God had promised that his people would be blessed. So we're going to study about God took care of his people. So right now it looks like God's not taking care of them. They're slaves. So sometimes it looks that way, that God's not taking care of you. But you keep watching, because God will take care of his people. Well, here he is. Jochebed, that was the name of Moses' mother. She had Miriam and Aaron, and now here comes Moses was born.
Well,
and
they
Moses,
didn't really name him yet.
Yes, he wasn't named. You're right. The Pharaoh had said, put all the little babies into the river. Throw them in the river.
Younger than 2?
No, when they're born, throw them in the
that
river.
was
As soon as
Jesus'
they're born,
time.
throw them into the river. Well, somehow Aaron had escaped that. Maybe it was after Aaron was born that they said all the new little babies be thrown into the river.
The boy babies.
Yep. So all the little boy babies were thrown into the river. Yes, she obeyed, didn't she? She threw him in the river. But first, what did she do?
Her mother.
No, we're talking about
Miriam.
Is this Miriam or Jochebed?
That's Miriam.
Okay. So what did Jochebed do? Put him in the river.
Miriam went and got the reeds from the river, and she would bring them to her mother, and Jochebed would make a basket. She would weave a basket for the top, and then she would put hitch on it, so it wouldn't sink. It would be waterproof. It's kind of like the stuff that Noah.
The ark, right?
That Noah.
So this is a little tiny ark, and what was going to be in there? A bunch of animals and a little baby? No, it's just going to be what? One little
tiny
baby. They wanted to save that baby, didn't they? So instead of throwing him in the river and letting him drown, she provided a little waterproof basket for him to be able to live. And Miriam watched, didn't she? Then along came Pharaoh's daughter, and she saw the basket. She asked one of her maidens to go get the basket. She'd come out to take a bath.
Oh, I thought that was...
And she'd gotten one of the maidens to get the basket, and in the basket was the cutest little baby, Lorea. If you'd have found that baby in the basket, what would you have done?
I would have taken him home, and Mom probably wouldn't even let me have it.
Oh, yes. What else could you do but help take care of him?
Lose him in a room.
Oh, no. Don't take him to your room.
Oh,
He might be lost. But anyhow, in the basket was this sweet little baby, and it's one of the Hebrew babies. That's what she said. And Miriam's watching. So Miriam jumps up and says, would you like for me to go get you a nurse? Well, yes, please do.
Well,
and Miriam ran back to her house and got her mama, Jochebed, and came and said, she'll be the baby's nurse. Oh, wasn't that sweet? She was ready to be the nurse because she'd been the nurse the whole time. So the princess, Pharaoh's daughter, let Jochebed nurse the baby until the baby was weaned, and then she brought the baby back to the princess, and this little prince, she named him Moses because she said, I drew him out of the water. Wasn't that sweet?
Okay,
and so his mama got to raise him. Now, why are you laughing?
Because he's so cute.
Yes, he is. Okay, so Moses was raised by Pharaoh's daughter, but he also knew his own mother. So all the time he was being raised, he knew who he was. He knew that he was one of the Hebrews, but he was being raised.
One thing doesn't get me. Why was the like weirded out by like Miriam just jumping out of the reeds and saying, "Do you need to get me a nurse for the baby?" Why doesn't she think that's kind of suspicious?
Well, even if she knew it was the baby's sister and that was the baby's mother, she didn't care. She just loved the little baby. God put the favor in her heart for the little baby, and that little baby was Moses. But anyhow, so Moses came out and looked at his brethren, the children of Israel, and he saw one of them, an Egyptian, beaten one of his brethren with a whip, and Moses killed the Egyptian. And the next day he came out and he saw two of them fighting each other, two of the Jews fighting each other, and he told them, "Why are you fighting your brethren?" And they said, one of them said, "What you going to do, kill me like you did the Egyptian yesterday?" So Moses knew it was known, and Moses went and left into the wilderness.
Well,
Because
first
Pharaoh had heard of it, and Pharaoh was going to do something to Moses. Yes. So he left, and when he got out in the wilderness, he saw a man's daughters keeping the sheep, and he made sure that they helped him water the sheep, and then he married one of the girls, and he was keeping the sheep out in the backside of the desert. And as he walked down the backside of the desert, now this was like 20 years later.
At least 40.
Let's see, he was 40 when all that happened. So it was about 40, even 40 years after that. So he was about 80 years old.
So when he ran away.
But then how did he, wow.
He was about 80 years old when this happened about the burning bush.
Right, but he wandered for 40 years in the desert, and that was the after that.
Yeah.
And then he was 120.
Yes.
But I didn't know how long that time that passed.
Okay, so
before they started wandering.
He was about 80 years old. He had been married. He'd had children, and he was living with the women's daddy, which was a priest, some sort of priest. And so he went on the backside of the desert. He saw a bush burning. He went to see what it was, and the voice spoke out of the bush and said, "Take off your shoes for your own holy ground." Woo! And he called him Moses. Take off your shoes.
I get it now, because like the shoes would probably like be a barrier between the holy ground and his feet.
Oh, yes. So he took his shoes off, and God began to speak to him and said he wanted him to go back and lead his people out. Lead his people out of Egypt and out of slavery. And he argued with the Lord because he said, I'm not eloquent. I can't speak well. And he said, well, I know Aaron can, so Aaron's come and meet you. So Aaron came out and met him, and they went back to Egypt, and they began to tell the people, God has sent us to get you out of bondage.
Wait, which is Moses and which is Aaron?
Santa Claus. Moses is Santa Claus.
No. So
But God has spoken to us. God has spoken to me to come get you out of Egypt.
Doesn't it say that Moses talked to? It never said that Aaron said it. It was like always Moses said this, and like I think it was just an excuse, and Aaron was just a backup. But it's kind of funny.
It turned out that way, but he didn't know it was going to be that way. He didn't really know himself. I don't think he didn't know what kind of leader he could be at that time.
Well, he never stood up about the Egyptian or anything either. I mean, he just ran away, so he probably never had the chance to, speak to Pharaoh or anything like that.
He didn't have experience yet, but he's getting experience, and now he's coming to Pharaoh, and he's speaking to Pharaoh, and he said, God said, let my people go. And he said, who is the Lord? Who is God that I should let his people go? Pharaoh would not. Pharaoh would not do it. And so Pharaoh got angry. He said, well, if these people are so at ease that they can just want to leave and go and worship to their God, want to sacrifice to their God, I'm going to make it really hard on them. So they said, you've got to work but you can't gather straw for bricks. You got to we're not giving you straw for bricks. You've got to gather it yourselves. So they got whipped and they got beat because they couldn't make all the bricks they wanted to without the straw, and they had to go gather it. So it
how
was
long
hard
does
for
it
them.
take to make just one brick?
Well, I don't know, but
Probably only takes like a day.
it was hard. So anyhow, they got mad at Moses because they said, "You haven't delivered us at all, and Pharaoh's being even harder on us." Lorea, sit right. Pharaoh's even being harder on us, and they were angry. And Moses went to the Lord and he said, "You haven't delivered the people at all, and I told him you would." So Moses was complaining to the Lord.
Did
And he
that
said,
a lot.
he said, "You go before Pharaoh, and you tell him to let your people go, and you show him the signs." Now God had shown Moses some signs, and here's one of them he showed him. He threw his rod down, it became a serpent. Well, Pharaoh had a bunch of magicians, and so they threw their rods down, and they became serpents.
Well, they weren't. It wasn't really their power. Just God had allowed them to do it.
No,
He had given.
he wouldn't do that. I think it was a trick. There is a certain, as far as I know, we talked about it in our Sunday school class. There's a certain way that you can grab a snake that makes it immobile, and it could have been, just the devil's power or whatever, allowing him to do it. But considering all their rods would have been, snake-like, because that was kind of the whole Egypt thing, then they could have had snakes where they throw them down and become snakes. Because it paralyzes the snake, and so then when you throw it down, it's fine.
Okay.
But
Well,
Moses
I
says
don't
it was
know
by
how
the
it
power of
happened.
God.
I don't know how it happened.
Right.
But Moses definitely became a snake from being a rod. And then when they did that, Pharaoh's looking and saying, "Well, he's not so powerful." Well, then the serpent that had turned into a serpent from the rod.
Wait,
it ate
did
up.
Aaron throw it down?
It ate up all the other serpents.
I'll kind of go with that too, because they weren't used to moving around a lot or eating anything. They were just kind of laying and paralyzed. The other snakes is what I mean.
How could one snake eat all those other snakes? I mean, just eat them, swallow them. That's terrible. But that's what happened.
Too.
That's what happened. So God had something in store for the Egyptians. And what they were, it was plagues. So he would not let the people go. Pharaoh would not let the people go. He had them as slaves. He wanted to keep using them as slaves. So God began to pour out plagues on them. The first one was he changed all the water to blood. And the river, the streams, everywhere turned to blood. It said they had to dig around places to try to find water that wasn't blood. And then, what about frogs and lice?
I always kind of found it funny how, the first one you start out and it's really, really bad. The water's turned to blood, all the fish are dying, you can't get any water. And then the next day, Moses comes God says there's going to be frogs. And Pharaoh's like, well, how bad could that be? It's just frogs. And then when it happens, you're like, oh, this was the worst thing that could have happened, because they're all dying and they're all everywhere.
Stinking.
But compared to the river turning into blood, it's just kind of random.
Lice all over your body and all the Egyptians' bodies, and then flies crawling all over everything. Then the cattle
kind of how it is in Florida anyway.
Killed by some horrible disease, and then boils all over everybody. And the children of Israel had none of that happening. And Pharaoh wouldn't have had all that happening, but he wouldn't let them go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plagues, 7, hail, broke down all the crops, whatever was left. Then the locusts came and ate it all up. And all in between all of those times, Moses is coming to Pharaoh. You be Pharaoh. Look very regal. God said, "Let my people go."
No!
All right, the frogs are coming. All right, the lice are coming. And when the lice came, the magicians came and said, "This is the finger of God. Let them go." And as it went on and it was horrible, they advised Pharaoh, "He's destroyed Egypt. let them go.
No!
But Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not let them go.
Well, didn't God harden his heart too? It wasn't
Yes.
him doing it.
God
It was
hardened
God
his
just
heart,
destroying
too.
Egypt and hardening his heart.
Yes, and then 3 days there was
I wonder if he hadn't done that, if
darkness
they would
all
have,
over all
if he
the
would have let them
land.
go.
Oh,
And,
isn't that
and
sleeping?
Pharaoh, God told Moses one more plague. And one more plague was going to be that all the firstborn in Egypt were going to die, the firstborn sons. And so he had first he had them to prepare for the Passover. The Passover was where the death angel was going to come and kill the Egyptians' sons, but he had them the children of Israel, to put the blood of a lamb over their doorpost and on their lintels, so that when the death angel came, that blood, the angel would see the blood and he would pass over them.
So if Miriam didn't listen, then basically she would die?
No,
Because she
it was
the
the
first one?
sons.
Oh,
So
Aaron.
here comes the death angel that night, and he went when he saw the blood, he passed over it. But when all the sons of the Egyptians were killed that night, even the son of Pharaoh, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So then that's when he told them, get out of there. Pharaoh called it Moses and said, get them out, get them out. They can go.
Shoot.
Get gone. So Moses led them out away from Egypt. They were all prepared and ready. They made their bread, but they didn't have time for it to rise. That's why they had unleavened bread for the Passover feast. So out they went out of Egypt, and they marched out of Egypt, all of them. And when they got out of Egypt and they marched, they came to the Red Sea. And look at it. It's a big, big body of water. And it's hard to see across to the other side. And what are we going to do? Because they looked behind them. And guess who was coming? The Egyptians. Pharaoh decided, what did I do letting all of our slaves go? I better go get them.
They
And
could
so,
have gone east
get
or west,
your chariots.
but they decided to go north. So
Get your chariots. Get ready. We're going to go get these people back, and I'm going to kill that Moses, and they're going to be our slaves again. So here's the children of Israel. They're seeing the dust being raised up from all the chariots headed their way. And they're looking on this side, and it's water from here to there. They can't go around it. What are they going to do? They cried out. Here's Pharaoh saying, we're going to chase them. They're not getting away from us. So they got in that chariots and headed that way. And all of the people cried to God and said, Moses, you brought us out here to die. We should have stayed there and been slaves. You brought us out here to die. And Moses said,
They said that
be
so
still.
much too. Like that was what they practically said that every day. They were like, we should have been in Egypt eating cucumbers,
Right.
and like every other day they complained about
cucumbers?
that.
Right. In other words, they were murmuring against God and against Moses. But when God told Moses to stretch out his rod. And here he is, God taking care of his people.
there's a rod over there.
We don't
He
need
said
a
to
rod.
stretch out his rod. And when he stretched out his rod, the waters rolled back.
And then we're
And
walking.
they all went across the Red Sea on dry ground. The waters congealed. It was like jello.
Like a
The
wall.
edges of the waters to make a wall. Wall on this side and a wall on that side.
Oh, so
And they were able to walk through on dry ground after the waters rolled back.
I just want
It wasn't mud. It wasn't so they just stick down. Their feet would sink down in it. No, it was dry ground.
That's what we're talking about with those miracles. Is a lot of times people skip over that, thinking, well, it's just dry ground just means that there wasn't any water there. But even in that miracle, they made the difference because it turned into mud. That after having water there for pretty much all of its the lifetime of the Red Sea, it wouldn't have just been dry and being able to walk on. It would have been sludge basically.
God made it dry ground.
Right.
That's what the Bible says.
And it's all those miracles of parting, waters. It'll say dry ground, and people skip over that usually because you don't think about it. which is like good wording, but it was really dry grounded,
Okay.
packed.
So here the Egyptians come after them and looked like they were going to overtake them. But when God looked down and he saw the Egyptians coming into the Red Sea onto that dry ground, he had a plan. What was his plan, Lorea?
To close up the waters
Right.
and make them drown and die.
Yes.
So
What
that
happened
they
was
would be
Moses
free.
stretched his rod back over the sea, and after all of the Israelites came all the way over, the Jews got all the way across, then he stretched his rod back over it, and the sea came back together. And God even loosed the chariot wheels where they couldn't drive out of there. So all of the people, the
He
Egyptians,
got them all in the
chased
middle,
them.
and then turned it into mud so they couldn't get out, and then the chariot wheels
Yep,
fell off.
They
and then-
sunk down into it, and all of them were killed.
Wait, couldn't they just hold their breath until they floated to the top?
No, there was so much. The Red Sea. That's the other thing, is that the Red Sea wasn't just like when you look at a body of water, you see the top, but it would go down way further. It depends on
Very
the depth.
deep. It was deep.
So like the Red Sea, it would basically be walking into a pathway underneath the waves. Like the waves would still be up top, but you'd be walking through it.
You know, I have seen lakes when people drain them. I mean, they're just small ones. Like
Yeah.
my uncle, he drained a lake that he had he had made the lake himself, but he drained it. And it is like that. You go down because it's deep.
Yeah,
You go
it's
down,
really deep. But you don't
and
see
then-
depth
and then
when
you
it's
come
dry.
Back up. You come back up. But so when Pharaoh went down into that Red Sea, then when the waters came back on him, it wasn't a
What? How many? Yeah,
impossibility
how many
of him
were
swimming
people?
out
They
of
were
it.
like how many Israelites at that time? There were like 1 million
6
of them.
million.
6 million.
Mhm.
So I mean, they had to have the waters were probably parted really wide because to get them through in one night's time or whatever would take such a long time. So it was probably a huge wide thing. So when Egyptians came in, it would just be all that water crashing down. So it didn't really matter about them floating up to the top because they would have been just. It's like, have you ever been into the beach and got hit by a wave or something? You're not in control at all. It just throws you around, and that's basically what's happening, just on a way larger scale.
It was horrible for them.
Oh, yeah.
But God was taking care of his people. They wanted to put them back into slavery. But God had already made up his mind that he was going to bring his children out of that slavery and bring them into the promised land.
Is that Miriam?
And Moses, Moses was bringing them out. Miriam got the timbrels, and all the women started dancing and praising God for bringing them out of slavery and bringing them out and heading toward the promised land. Moses had successfully gotten them away from the Egyptians. So we just want you to understand this day that God will take care of his people, and he he will take care of you. God took care of Noah, and God now, I can't find my other paper. God took care of Moses and the people of Israel, the children of Israel, and here it is. God took care of his people, and he's going to take care of you, because are you one of his people, Lorea?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me get all these. I got it. If you're one,
Okay.
get it all out. If you're one of his people, then it doesn't matter what's going on. It doesn't matter if somebody takes you and makes you a slave, or it doesn't matter if if there's going to be a big flood. It doesn't matter what's going to happen in this life. If you will realize, if God took care of Noah, if God took care of his people when they were slaves and brought them out of Egypt, if God did that, God will take care of me. You know, what's going to happen, Bill, in the next year? Do you have any idea what might happen between the time you're 17 and you're 18? You don't know. But you can always believe that whatever happens, God is going to take care of you. He wants you to believe that. He wants you to have faith in that. Well, looks like our time is up. So, Lorea, who did God take care of so far?
Moses and Noah.
And all of the children of Israel, right?
60-something
6
thousand.
million.
6
Oh,
million.
okay.
A different number.
Praise the Lord. Okay, we'll see you next
So
week. See
600,000.
who else God